Careshmeh Dean is an emerging author, educator, and storyteller whose debut memoir, Made for Me, shares a moving journey of love, faith, and resilience. A former real estate professional turned teacher, she now uses her gift for connection to inspire others through her writing and life experiences. And she's with us here just now. How are you today?
Doing fabulous. How are you?
I'm excellent, thank you. Now, for those who haven't read your debut book, Made for Me, can you just give us an overview?
So it is a story of love,
Hmm.
loss, grief, and redemption. I was married the first time for 22 years in a really horrific marriage, and always held out that I was going to find the love of my life.
Hmm.
That was intended for all of us, and I believe that. I think the story, my book is to teach a few lessons, and one of them is that true love is possible for everyone, for everyone. You have to have a fair amount of faith and patience. And it took me a long time, and I found him. But then the story goes through our courtship, our love, the marriage, which was incredible. And then he ended up getting sick. We spent a couple of years in the hospital, literally living in the hospital.
Hmm.
And then at the loss of my husband, the one that truly made me happy, I fell into just the deepest, unconsolable, they call it complicated grief, because no amount of therapy, and I did all the intensive ketamine, whatever the psychiatrist recommended, could
Yeah.
not surmount it. And there was a fair amount. Grief is an interesting thing. That is a lesson that the book will highlight, because we tend to think, oh, that's so sad, something happened and they're being taken care of. And we don't consider the horrific things that other people do to those who
Hmm.
lose, right? But in the end, I ended up seeing how wonderful that I had a larger capacity to love than I ever imagined, and that you could be redeemed. There is redemption.
Yeah. And people deal with grief differently. So, what are some of the ways that you've seen people deal with grief, and how would you say you've dealt with your own grief?
That's an interesting thing, because it is as multifaceted and complex as you think it is.
Hmm.
You have the people who have been caretakers for a long, long, long time, who cannot handle it anymore. And though they love their spouse, or whomever it is that they're taking care of, they love them deeply, but it is horrific. The burden of caretaking is sometimes overwhelming to the point where they wonder who's going to pass first, the caretaker or the person who's dying.
Hmm.
And so once they're released from that, hey, they actually feel a fair amount of relief. And then there's the guilt that's compounded to that. But I was a caretaker that I told people regularly I would have changed his diapers for the rest of my life, gladly, with
Hmm.
pleasure, like happily do that just to have him. And then you have people who are estranged. But it's interesting, because you think, oh, they're estranged, they didn't love each other anyway. You can't go through a life with someone every single day where you don't have a deep connection.
Hmm.
You are building from the moment that you wake up. You lay next to them, you wake up. It doesn't matter how much you like them. You go into a cadence, a rhythm of life that, even if you think, oh my gosh, I could care less what happens to them, once they're gone, I've noticed those couples, they are freaking out because they don't know how to deal with what they thought would have happened. And grief is 100-pound backpack that you take through your life for the rest of your life. You can
Yeah.
set it down for a moment, but you can never get away from it. It's with you forever. So it is as broad ranging as you think it is. As there are personalities, that's how people handle their grief. I was inconsolable, and I'm a high functioning human.
Hmm.
So it was very interesting to see myself fall back into this lower cadence, this rhythm that I was unfamiliar with, and not be able to recognize myself. I would look in the mirror, I dropped, I don't know, 20 pounds that I didn't have to lose.
Wow.
And I was skeletal, and there was just so many things that were on top of it that made me hate myself, want to die. I was willing myself to die because I couldn't handle living in a world where everything was so it was so lacking in love for me. Even though I had, and I say this, I had so many loving people around me, but the hole that was left when my husband passed it was an abyss. It literally just gaped open and had no end.
And what advice would you give to somebody who's maybe facing similar challenges of grief?
I steer away from advising people, because that is probably the number one thing people who have lost hate.
Yeah.
You should serve more. You should get a hobby. You should reinvent yourself. I mean, people have a lot of advice, and they don't even know what they would do if they were in that, in those circumstances. They would be like, ah. So I don't give advice, but I do say I kept a sliver of light open, and I don't even know if it was me that kept it open. There were people around me that just flocked to me, and it was necessary, because the people who I thought would be there for me, the family, my late husband's family, abandoned me. They were, at the onset of the funeral, I had no idea. And I didn't know them well enough, but they were cold and calculating. They sent hate mail, hate email. They employed people to send me messages about my late husband that were lies. And it was phenomenal to see that. But I believe that God will put in your place the people who leave. He loves us, and he wants people to help us. And that's exactly what he did for me. I had amazing family on my side and friends that I call family who came in and helped me see that sliver. You have to keep the door open slightly for the light to come in, because light drives out dark. It always does.
Yeah.
And the more you open the door, the more the light shines in. I was just very blessed to know that someone loved me enough. And I say that Josh, my late husband, loved me enough. I do believe he is always with me and around me. That he loved me enough to help me procure another path while I'm here that would be happy and that would be satisfying and joyful. So I guess in answer to your question, it would be leave that door. Don't shut it all the way. Keep it slightly open, because there's always possibility, even though you can't see it.
So what was it that ultimately made you decide to write a book about your own experiences?
Well, I am a writer anyway. I'm a pretty consistent journaler, and I have written other books. I just never published anything. This one was something that touched my soul and needed to come out. And there were people around me just consistently saying, Careshmeh, this story needs to be shared. I know it's going to be painful, but this story needs to be shared just so that people can understand what it means to lose, what it means to have, like, how do you interact with people who keep saying snide things like, he's in a better place. Well, what better place would there be than with me and our kids, or he had a more important work to do. No. No, I mean, if anyone believes in God, they know that the first person that you're going to be accountable to is your spouse, and then your children. That's, you're going to be like, what kind of a spouse and what kind of a parent were you? And then from there, it's amazing to have these cliches and these trite comments flung at you. But I understood that there were people who were having that happen and didn't know how to handle it. And sometimes you need to have a very clear, blunt story in front of you to help you navigate your own story. And that was my purpose, was to share my beautiful love story, which it is an incredible love story. Share the egregious and just heart-wrenching parts of sickness and caretaking and death. And then to trudge through the shadow of the valley of death and come out in the light.
Of course, naturally, parts of the book are quite dark and raw. So how did you deal with writing those parts? Was it quite difficult, or was it quite therapeutic?
I know, and everyone keeps saying that. The word is cathartic. It'll be
Yeah.
so cathartic. And I'm like, no, it will test the bounds of my sanity, which it did. The entire experience tested my ability to stay sane. And I had a dear friend say to me, we protect our sanity at all costs. We don't, that's, as we talk about boundaries and everything, she said, Careshmeh, you have to protect your sanity at all costs. But how do you protect your sanity from yourself? As your brain starts to go down a rabbit hole that yields in it yields nothing good. So it was hard. I had to put a lot of my therapy that I mean, I had an amazing therapist. She gave me some EMDR treatment, and that brought me out of a lot of my darkness, not completely, but it really gave me some skills and abilities to be able to step outside of myself and say, wait, we're going. Remember how hard it is to get out of this hole. Remember how many days it takes. So just kind of, so I had to take some breaks, especially because you think, oh, you wrote it. Well, then you have to rewrite, you read it, and you have to edit it,
Yes.
and you have to re-edit it again. And I just like, oh no, and there was a point, because I described my time before my husband Daniel and I married, and that's a remarkable story because he was the man who married my late husband and I. This is how I knew
Wow.
it was divinely orchestrated, because I wasn't dating.
Mm.
I wasn't in a place to even, you know, consider that. And I had written a particularly dark post that only he understood, because he had been checking in. He was friends with us, deep
Yeah.
friends, and he checked in with me, and that initiated me coming out of what I call my burning. There was a burning, physical burning. And if you talk to people who are in, complicated or just extreme grief, they'll tell you there's a burning inside. It's like your insides are on fire. And Daniel brought me out of that. So I
Wow.
do remember one particular moment I was editing and I was going through, and it took me 2 days to get out of that because I was reacquainted with that burning, and it was terrifying. Terrifying. I had to reground myself in, where am I? Where am I presently? I'm right here. I'm with Daniel. I am not in the gall of bitterness.
Yeah.
I've been given the balm in Gilead, if you will.
So, what is your goal for writing this book? I mean, is there a specific audience, or what do you hope to accomplish with the book?
I wrote this book for everyone. I often say it's funny that people treat people who have lost as if they're contagious, like, ooh, we can't spend too much time with the widow, or we can't spend too much time with that mom that just lost her baby, or, we can't spend because
Yeah.
it's contagious. Well, the joke's on you. You already have the virus. We're all going to die, and we're all
Yeah.
going to experience this. So the book is written for everyone. For anyone who's lost, but anyone who wants to understand, what does that actually look like? We are commanded to mourn with those that mourn. And it is astounding how that does not happen, first off. And it's astounding how, when people do try, which I'm going to put a pin in that for a minute. I was told again and again and again, well, they're just doing their best. You can Google what not to say to someone who just lost. There is, so really, for people who want to know how to navigate this themselves, how to navigate the loved ones who are experiencing it, and how to just those are the purposes, but it's also a truly amazing love story to tell the world. Give hope that there
Yeah.
is love. You can find love, and you can find it more than once if you're in if that is your goal, just find your mate, the one you can spend your life with and be fulfilled. It's possible.
Well, do you have plans to write any more books after this one?
Yes. Well, I've already written several that I'm also in the process of publishing. I've written, it's a fourth grade chapter book because I'm Iranian. My father is from Iran. And so I have a Persian myth that I've written. I've
Oh.
also written a couple of picture books for kids because I am a teacher, and that is my teacher heart. How do we
Yes.
teach goodness and put good in the world? So I have 4 more books coming out. I also have in the process already started. I don't know if you're familiar with C.S. Lewis. I was given,
Yeah.
I think, 30 different books by people to read, right? Because they thought I had nothing better to do in my time but than to just read more about grief.
Yes.
I was like, ah! But I did read C.S. Lewis, Grief Observed.
Mm.
And I felt that was, it has its place, and it was definitely helpful. And it actually mirrored my story. He found the love
Mm.
of his life, and he was with her approximately the same amount of time that I was with my late husband. He was also, had to go through caretaking and then lost her, and his journey was very similar to mine. But I'm going to write a grief unobserved, because
Okay.
that's how I feel the world is and how they interact. And I don't know that all cultures, it will take some research into all the different cultures, but the American culture is woefully lacking in how they deal with grief and how they help. So I am going to have, it might be a bullet point. It is going to be probably more of a dicey, direct, raw, if you want raw, like,
Yeah.
hey, stupid, don't do that. I might not use the word stupid. I don't believe in calling names, but I do believe in making things very clear. Like, oh, this isn't right, if
Yeah.
you want to know. So it will be more along the lines of, how does the grief observer handle the griefee, if you will?
Well, in the meantime, this current memoir is called Made for Me. So, where are we able to find that book?
Careshmeh.com. It is pre-order status already, so that's CARESHMEH.com. I'm also on Facebook, Careshmeh Dean, author. We have Instagram, and we're pulling up our TikTok. So
Oh.
yeah, I know that's like for like you have no idea, but anyway, my daughter's like, because I don't know about that. So anyway, but yes, we are in all of those places, careshmeh.com, and it is an amazing read. I know I'm the author, but it is a read to just explain grief, love, grief, loss, and redemption.
Brilliant. Well, many thanks for joining us. It's been great to have you on the show today.
Wonderful, wonderful. I appreciate it. Thank you so very much.